Hey, good afternoon. We are here on Agri-Talk. We are missing my friend here. He's supposed to be getting here pretty soon. Guess he had a prior conference call he couldn't get out of. But anyway, today we're talking with Dan Remley, who works at OSU South Centers, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And going to be talking about food, food security, and a little bit about diabetes.
Yes.
I guess you is it diabetes or diabetes?
Oh, you say tomato or tomato.
Yeah. Well, there's that
I
one
say
guy.
diabetes. I don't know if there's an official way to say
Right.
it.
Well, there's that old guy, Wilford Brimley, I think, on the
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah.
Diabetes. Okay. As far may you tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay. I have well, first of all, I've been working for Extension, the Cooperative Extension Service for about, since 1999. I started in University of Missouri and was a nutrition specialist in the northeast part of that state, very rural. And the county I served we had 5,000 people in the entire county. So that was a good experience, and started my work here at Ohio State University Extension and worked in Butler County, which is just north of Cincinnati. Worked there for about 10 years, and then moved to South Centers about 3 years ago in 2012 and started my position as a field specialist in food nutrition wellness.
So at the previous positions as extension, were you just like
I was
a regular extension guy, or were you?
I was a county level family and consumer sciences extension educator. And so a lot of my programming, of course, addressed food safety, nutrition, diabetes education, just like what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is now I'm also faculty in the Department of Extension in the College of Food, Agriculture, Environmental Sciences, and but I do hold a 100% extension appointment. I don't work at the county level, I work at the state level. And so I have projects, various locations around Ohio.
What kind of projects would those be?
Well, one project is called the Voices for Food project, and what we're trying to do is improve the foods that are available in food pantries, trying to get healthier options in food pantries, healthier choices, and help pantries transition to a choice food pantry model where people can come in and choose food that they want and they need. There's less food waste that way.
Is that because pantries would generally trying to make their dollar stretch farther by the cheapest thing possible?
Sometimes, sometimes in some pantries, they're they have to work with what they're given.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you think about the last time you participated in a like a food drive, what types of foods did you give? Can you remember?
Maybe the stuff that I didn't use.
Okay.
The stuff that I don't turn over
the
very
shrimp
much.
cocktail sauce and things like that.
Yeah.
And the beans, the can of beans that have been sitting around. The beans are healthy, but
Right.
So
I'm not saying didn't use and were expired.
right.
But
So, well, your experience is pretty typical. Most of the time, food pantries have foods that, or give away foods that are shelf stable, that have chock full of a lot of preservatives and sodium and fat and that type of thing. So,
right. And I learned too, I've had a few heart issues, that canned vegetables are much higher in sodium than like frozen.
Canned
So
vegetables can be.
That's where we
And
more or less buy now frozen
and so
stuff.
this is another thing too. A lot of food pantries don't have the equipment needed to store like frozen vegetables or meats and that type of thing. So they
Right.
might just have shelving, and so their options could be limited. So that's one project. And we're also in these communities that we're working with on this Voices for Food project. We're hoping to start food councils, and we've in a couple of these communities we've started these food councils that are basically food coalitions, different people that have come together around and have addressed food issues in their communities. And so a lot of these food councils are made up of producers, farmers, but also consumers, people working in food retail, like grocery store owners, just anybody who works in the food system. And they've worked on projects in the community, such as established community gardens or started farmers markets and those types of things. And this is a project that focuses on rural communities. So we have the criteria that we chose for this project, where we focused on rural and then food insecure communities as well. So we have 4 communities in Ohio, and this is a 5-year grant. It's funded by the USDA, and we're in year 4 right now. But we're collecting data on food pantry clients and also community food pantry volunteers, looking at their perceptions of the community, but also looking at what they're eating and what they're taking home from the food pantry.
Can the food pantry like set a standard? Okay, we need these certain things.
Sure. Yeah. In fact, there are a lot of resources that food pantries can use to procure healthier foods. And part of this is educating the community about healthy foods that are needed. So there are ways to ask for certain food groups, for example, dairy. There's a really good website out there. It's called Healthy Food Bank Hub. It's sponsored by, or it's put together by Feeding America. And they have lots of resources that food pantries can use, food banks can use, any nonprofits that are in the food charity business or the emergency food business, and resources that can help communities do healthy food drives. So not just ask for the things that you mentioned, the canned or the or the shrimp cocktail sauce, but things like dairy and meats, and how do we procure?
Yeah, do they
those types
have places to refrigerate or freeze these things?
In some food pantries they do, but not all food pantries.
They're mostly like the dry shelf type stuff, whether it's bread and canned stuff.
Yes. Yep. So
I was just wondering, how about do food pantries take things from hunters? I know there are certain places that will take like deer meat.
yeah, because you're not selling food, you're not bound by any food codes, that type of thing. So some food pantries will do that. The food banks also will have. The food banks are regional, and they distribute the USDA commodities to food banks under their umbrella. So here in this county, they're served by the Southwest Food Bank here, and so the food banks might have policies, food safety policies. But sure, some food pantries will accept game, and
Not roadkill.
but you still have to have a way to refrigerate, so
Right.
you have to have the equipment to do that type of thing. But it is important to offer those foods, because about 2/3 of people that come into the food pantry are shopping for someone in their family with a chronic disease like diabetes. And so people are concerned about the food they're eating,
Sure.
and wanting healthy choices so that they can better manage these problems like diabetes.
Right.
So
So let's see. I was going to ask a question. I forgot. Anyway, when you say food secure, what is food security?
that's having enough food, and it also means having enough variety of food. So having enough fruits and vegetables, dairy, meats, not just one type of food. And so we determine or we define food insecurity as sort of it's more or less a perception that at one point or the past month you felt like you didn't have enough food, or your family didn't have enough food, or you had to you didn't have enough of a particular type of food. So that's a way to look at food insecurity, and there's different degrees of it. So there's the USDA has defined different degrees. There's very low, there's low food insecurity, there's food insecurity. So depending on how you respond to the questionnaire, kind of categorizes you into
And does
one of
that
these
account
groups.
for people's poor choices? Like, yeah, I didn't eat any vegetables all month because I didn't want them, or because you didn't have them?
Well, it could be a little bit of both. I think that there are some situations. I mean, in Ohio, I work with other states too, but in Ohio, I think we're pretty lucky that way, in that there are food deserts, not only in the inner cities, but there's what we call food deserts in
Okay.
rural
What's a food
areas.
desert?
It's defined as if you live in an urban area, it's living more than a mile away from a grocery store, and because in urban areas have more of an infrastructure where you can walk. Okay, so there's still a lot of communities, but they're also thought to be communities where a lot of people live more than a mile from any type of grocery store, and also the high rates of people not having access to like an automobile too. It's even a problem in some suburban communities. You might have large grocery stores, but there's not really a infrastructure to support walking or biking, and there isn't public transportation, that type of thing. So it's a food access issue. And in terms of the other thought about not wanting vegetables, well, there's a lot of tasty foods out there, and
I mean, people make poor choices.
And it's not just people on limited incomes; it's all of us.
Sure,
so,
right.
We don't want to have to kind of keep that in mind too. And it's hard. It's hard. There's a lot of tasty foods. There's, we have we're surrounded by food. We're bombarded by advertisements that promote candies and chips and cookies and cakes, and I call them the 4 C's.
Right.
And a lot of great restaurants, and so it's hard. The cards are kind of stacked against us, I would say. So it's a problem in the everywhere.
Yeah, I guess the thing, I finally remember what I was going to ask about. You say USDA Commodities. What are those?
The government issues commodities they're called TFAB. There's supplemental nutrition programs, and there are commodities that the government purchases that are distributed, and
is that like the old government cheese we used to talk about?
It could be. It's changed throughout the year. Remember the old generic cans of. I remember growing up seeing those in the grocery stores, just the black and white labels. But
right.
No, it's I'm not as familiar with the commodity system and where the foods come from, but I do know that these USDA commodities are distributed through the regional food banks. And some of the food banks are really good about getting those healthier, procuring those healthier commodities. And many, like Mid-Ohio Food Bank up in Columbus, has a really good fresh fruit and vegetable program where they distribute fresh fruits and vegetables to emergency food providers. So I would say that many of our food banks especially are becoming more aware of the issues and problems and doing a better job of supplying those healthier foods.
Okay.
But there's still many food pantries that might not be affiliated with a food bank, that are smaller, that struggle to get those healthier foods in.
Okay, since this is Agri-Talk and maybe some farmers watch, is there something that a farmer should know? I mean, is there a problem with them getting all their crop out, or if they are socially aware, are there places where they could donate to, or I don't know if that would be beneficial to them in any way? It's
good to be aware of the food pantries in your community. Call your extension office, and there's hopefully. If you're interested, if you have a crop that's edible, if you're growing sweet corn, for example, and you have some leftover crop, there are gleaning programs around different parts of the state. In fact, I had just heard of a program up in Lima, Ohio. I'm not real familiar with it, but there are those opportunities. So I would call your local extension office and see if there are any groups out there that do wish to glean, which means recover some of your unused crops.
You say green?
Glean, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you have any crops that you don't want to go to waste, they're sitting out in your field, there are, depending on where you live, I would call your extension office, and hopefully...
would they come and pick that up?
Well,
you think?
again, extension is kind of it's a good group to work with because
They just like connect the dots? We know this guy, and
they connect the dots, sure.
Okay.
So there might be a family and consumer sciences extension educator there who's working with some food pantries, or might be working with a food policy council or a food council that's working on food waste issues. And it kind of depends where you're at, though. So probably you're more likely to find a program, a gleaning program, like if you live in a larger urban or suburban county than maybe a rural. But I'm not familiar with the programs around the state as much as I probably need to be. But it's an opportunity. So
Okay.
Call your extension office.
Okay. So let's switch the gears just a little bit. We also mentioned diabetes and nutrition. So what can you tell us about that, and how do you work with diabetes and nutrition?
Well, if diabetes affects about 10% of our population, and it's especially if you're in the southern part of the state here and southern Ohio, you're probably more likely to have diabetes. And in fact,
And it's not just a food or a imbalance of things in your body. This can affect all kinds of stuff. Seeing people lose limbs, their sight. It's a horrible disease.
Yeah, if you don't manage it well, there's some really serious complications,
Right.
and probably you increase your risks for cardiovascular problems, stroke, heart disease, but also it affects all of your organs. And so there's problems. There's kidney disease so you're more likely to develop a kidney problem, and that's a terrible problem. Nobody wants to go on dialysis.
Right.
And that chronic kidney disease. There's diabetic retinopathy, so it's the #1 cause of blindness. There's neuropathy, and so you may lose sensation in your feet or your extremities, your hands or your feet, and it may go numb. And so you might have a sore on your foot that you might not feel. And so it can become infected, and that's where, in extreme cases, you might have to have an amputation.
Right. I just bring that up because, whenever I first, you just hear about diabetes, you think, oh, this person just has to manage their sweets, or if it's the other way around, then they just need a candy bar every once in a while. But it is way more complicated than that.
Yeah, it's the recommendations aren't really different from for a person with non-diabetes. I mean, in terms of even the dietary recommendations, they're really not that different. It's really about balancing your food and your exercise and your medications, and then checking your blood sugars to make sure that you're in balance. And with type 1s, for example, and I'm a type 1, technology is really improving, and so there's these continuous blood glucose monitors that check your blood sugar automatically every 5 minutes, and so you can look at patterns throughout the day after meals, that type of thing.
Now, do you have to have something injected into you to do that, or
it's kind of like something that's inserted.
Okay.
And
So it's not like a pulse monitor that it operates from the outside.
I think eventually, yeah, right. So it's something that's stuck into your subcutaneous. It goes into your fat layer right underneath your skin, and so my brother-in-law has one. He can look at his blood sugars on his cell phone. So it
probably gives you a graph.
Gives you a graph, and he can see kind of the patterns throughout the day. And a lot of doctors, if you have diabetes and you go talk to your endocrinologist, they'll want to see those patterns throughout the day so that they can give you advice and they can adjust your medicines and talk to you about your meal plan, for example, and just making sure that you're in balance. Because what we see, these complications that you and I just talked about, you're more likely to develop those problems, the eye problems, kidney, nerve problems, cardiovascular, if your blood sugars are out of control. And so that's the goal of diabetes therapy, is to manage those blood sugars. before and after meals, in between meals.
Now, as far as type 1 and type 2, is there any dietary differences?
Not at all. I would say, depending on the therapies might be different, and the regimens might be a little different. But with type 1, people that take insulin can adjust the insulin according to their carbohydrate intake. And so if I have a big meal with a lot of carbohydrates, I can take more insulin. People with type 2 may be on a medication, a pill like metformin. And so a lot of times the goals of those types of diabetes regimens would be to maybe stay within a calorie range or a carbohydrate range, for each meal and snack, but not really to deviate much from those. I would say probably for type 1, in terms of, because I can adjust my insulin, that you can be a little bit more flexible with that type of thing, but you really want to be in balance, and so making sure that you have a consistent meal plan, meal pattern, and so that you don't want to skip meals, because medication will lower your blood sugars. And so if you skip a meal, you can have a hypoglycemic reaction, which is another complication of diabetes, and that can be pretty serious, actually. It can put you in the hospital. So the good news is I think they're getting a lot better at managing diabetes, and people with diabetes, don't be afraid to go. If you get diagnosed, don't be afraid. Just work with your healthcare provider. You can still live a long and healthy life. So.
Now, is there a program where people can learn more about this?
Yeah, actually,
you were talking about this.
There's a couple of programs. There's there is a one out of the YMCA spearhead. It's diabetes prevention program. That's to try to, if you think you have a history of diabetes in your family and you're concerned about developing diabetes, or you're pre-diabetic, you can participate in this. There's also one out of the Department of Aging that's called Healthy or Diabetes U, and it's sort of a diabetes support group. Extension does a class called Dining with Diabetes, and depending on your extension office, they may offer a class. I think there's a class coming up in Washington County. There's a class in Ross County, and I think Scioto, Lawrence County had some classes. But these are sort of cooking schools for people with diabetes. They
just not eating out with diabetes. It's fixing your own stuff.
Fixing your own meals and snacks. Learning how to cook, prepare healthy foods, and how to take traditional recipes and modify them so that they're lower in fat and sodium.
I was going to ask you what...
And carbohydrate lower. I'm thinking about what a healthy, well-balanced meal should look like. So it combines diabetes education, but also we do cooking demonstrations, and there's taste testing. So the taste testing is pretty popular.
Right. Well, that would sell you on the recipe.
Yeah.
How would a recipe change? Maybe a popular thing.
Well, if it has like a lot of sodium, we talk about just different ways that you can lower sodium without sacrificing flavor, and we can use a lot of herbs and spices to make things very flavorful. The same with sweets too. You can lower your sugar. You can substitute with the artificial sweeteners. You can even add vanilla, that can amplify the sweetness of certain foods.
I've kind of cut out, not really cut out, but I've tried to cut out a lot of sugar, and I've gone to chocolate instead.
Yeah,
that's supposed to be
chocolate.
Supposed to do a little bit better for you.
Chocolate has antioxidants, and
right.
I recommend the dark chocolate.
Right, that's what I do. At least 70%.
Yeah, that's great.
Then the other, what else would change in the way you cook? Is there like salt less? And the other thing I do, I don't use as much salt, but I like cayenne peppers, and I spice it up a lot.
I think lowering the fat, if you can, or at least change what fats you use. And
would that be like butter, margarine, vegetables?
Yeah, switching out and actually using more of the liquid oils when you're preparing foods, whether you're sauteing or frying, that type of thing. Just staying away from the solid fats.
Well, that's you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Or at least limiting the solid fats, not cutting out. But
there are certain things that have maybe a lower melting level. You know, if it stays a solid longer, that's probably worse. Am I wrong in
well,
thinking
anything
that?
that's solid at room temperature is really probably has a lot more of those saturated fats, which the nutrition experts really think can contribute a lot more to the heart disease and cardiovascular problems. So I think anything that's solid at room temperature those are the things you probably want to cut back on a little bit.
Because that's what I was thinking, you know, since it's got to run through the veins.
Yep.
I'm about 90 some degrees. If it's still a solid at 90 degrees, it might get in there and be a solid in me.
Yeah, that's about right. And you can still melt your butter and that type of thing. But yeah, it's you know, it's more of it's kind of the metabolic structure of the fats, you know, and how it interacts with your cardiovascular system. Not, you know, definitely want to cut back. But fats in general have 9 calories per gram, so they're more calorie dense to begin with. And fats might not, it's really interesting too with diabetes because the fats actually slow down the rise in blood sugar, which might not be necessarily a bad thing, but we do store fats, and one of the problems is that we get these fatty deposits on our organs, and so you can get fatty deposits on your pancreas, which is important in diabetes too. And so we want to avoid, you know, the fat storage in certain places in our body. For men, we want to avoid this.
Yeah, that's tough to do sometimes.
Right. So, yeah. So
you know, we start out eating when we're 18 years old, these huge meals, and then 30. You slow down. 50, you slow down some more, and it's
you
like
try to slow down. Sometimes it's hard to.
I know, that's
make
what I'm
those
saying.
adjustments.
You like eating that big meal, and then
I think it's important to listen to your body too, and to be intuitive about things. And you know, you think about. I'm not a big breakfast eater. I know people that really like to eat large breakfasts, but it really slows you down throughout the day. And so that's your body's way of saying, hey, you know, you don't need this much food.
yeah. Do you think cereal's a good thing, or is that more carb centric?
It is high. It is very high in carbohydrate, and I see we're having to cut out here, but there are healthier choices when it comes to cereal, and so you want the cereals with more fiber, you know, less added sugar, but even try to work in those blueberries and blackberries, and I mean that has a lot of nutritional value to your cereal. And cereal, you know, there's a lot worse things you could eat. So
all right. So if you want to know more, where would you go on the web?
Well, we have an online diabetes education class, and if you type in if you Google Dining with Diabetes Beyond the Kitchen, it should pop up. We're housed under E-Extension, and you'll have to get an account. You put in your name, and it gives you a username and a password, and you can register for the class, and you can interact with extension educators. You can interact with, there's quizzes, you can interact with other class members, and you can share ideas and that type of thing. You learn about healthy grocery shopping, different resources for helping you eat out healthily. And then we have presentations as well. So there's a lot of information that you can take advantage of if you can't get to a class in your community. So.
Okay. Well, thanks for watching. Eating's important to all of us, and it's important to do it well. So. Thanks for watching again, and we'll see you next month on Agri-Talk.
You guys are good.
You gonna turn down the